Good morning, Chitralekha. Good morning, Saksham. Good morning, everyone. So, this week is dedicated to the legal current issues, and today I have taken up one of the most hotly debated issues of the current India, the present India, and the issue is the hate speech and freedom of speech and expression. And with this note, a very warm good morning to all of you, Chitralekha, Saksham, Prableen, Mehul, Soumya, and everyone who has joined the session, live session, and who are about to join. A very warm greetings of the day to you. Now, I was telling you that today's topic is hate speech and freedom of speech and expression. And this is one of the most hotly debated issues in the present scenario in our country. Because, there's a very thin line of difference between hate speech and freedom of speech and expression. But the question is that this thin line of difference between hate speech and freedom of speech and expression is something that has given the states, especially the governments who have been in power from time to time, to blur this thin line of difference and often label a democratic freedom of speech and expression as a hate speech. Also, there have been incidents where hate speeches have been held to be freedom of speech and expression. So both the things where the states attempt to blur this vision, blur this difference between hate speech and freedom of speech and expression, and also where the governments quite often term freedom of speech and expression as a hate speech or a hate speech as a freedom of speech and expression. This is something where a proper, wise, holistic analysis of the law is required. People with legal acumen should know where your freedom of speech and expression stops and from where the hate speech begins. Okay. Now, how do you define hate speech? Section 124A of the IPC is sedition. Okay. Sedition means that means if you are inciting violence. Okay. If any group of individuals or any person is trying to incite hatred against the government of India established by law, government established by law in India, then that amounts to sedition. But the Supreme Court, the apex court, in a catena of judgments is of the view that hate speech or sedition is something that should incite violence. If I am inciting you to do something wrong, if I am inciting you to wage war against the government of India or to create hatred in your hearts against the government of India, that is merely not sufficient to constitute the offense of sedition. Supreme Court says that the violence should unfold so far as sedition is concerned. People should be incited. Okay. They should be prompted, and this should be manifest in their behaviors, in their conduct. That is what the Supreme Court has categorically held in catena of judgments. Hate speech, about the hate speech. Now, what about the freedom of speech and expression? This is one of the most properly studied topic so far. Freedom of speech and expression as contained under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution is considered as one of the bedrocks for democracy. It is a touchstone for any government that claims to be democratic, because every government has to testify its its democratic truth on the touchstone of freedom of speech and expression. If the government is giving the widest freedom of speech and expression, then its claim to be democratic is true. Otherwise, on paper, on the Constitution, on the papers and the books of the Constitution, we can say that the government is, democratic, but the government might not be democratic in its conduct. Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution is one of those golden threads, along with Article 14 and 21, that runs across the fabric of the Constitution. That the most precious thing any democracy would ever have. Every democracy's democratic nature is tested on the touchstone of freedom of speech and expression. Okay, but the question is that with this freedom of speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a) comes a set of reasonable restrictions under Article 19(2) of the Constitution. Okay, such as security of the state, sovereignty of the nation, public order, decency and morality, incitement to a violence, incitement to an offense, contempt of court, defamation, and the like. The question is that if these kinds of things, they are, if you are using these reasonable restrictions to exercise your freedom of speech and expression, that means you are not justified. Okay, because there is a difference between incitement to an offense and freedom of speech. And that is what has been discussed in today's PDF document. Incitement to violence against a community is wrongly being referred to only as hate speech. This should go beyond considering it as a hate speech. However, some of the lawyers are of the view that hate speech is not even recognized anywhere in any law, in IPC or in any law in India. Is that true? I can agree to this point that hate speech as an offense has not been described separately in IPC or in any other criminal law in India. But Supreme Court has categorically explained and elucidated the concept of hate speech in most of the cases relating to hate speech. Okay. And we have plenty of provisions for, hate speech also. And those are the provisions which have been thoroughly discussed in today's article. Okay. Incitement to violence against a community is wrongly being referred to only as hate speech. In January, Gregory Stanton, the founder of Genocide Watch, who had predicted a genocide in Rwanda years before it took place in 1994, sounded the alarm on violence against Muslims in India. Exactly. Now you people started commenting that Chitralekha says no, sir. There are offenses against public tranquility. Even that's what I'm saying. There are sections 153A, 153AA. These are all the sections promoting enmity between different groups. Pankhuri says section 154A of IPC can come under it. Exactly. And this document is also telling us that you should go beyond this. Okay. Now in January, Gregory Stanton, the founder of Genocide Watch, who had predicted a genocide in Rwanda years before it took place in 1994, sounded the alarm on violence against Muslims in India. Now, what is important for you to note here is that Gregory Stanton is the founder of Genocide Watch. What is Genocide Watch? Who is Gregory Stanton? Where is Rwanda? And what had happened in Rwanda? Can you please answer these questions? To at least acknowledge me that you have little idea about these questions, about these nuggets of information. Do you have any idea about these things? Where is Rwanda? What had happened in Rwanda? What is Genocide Watch? And who is Gregory Stanton? Okay. Rwanda is an African country, right, Aditya Prakash? Rwanda is an African country. South Africa is a country, Chitralekha. Africa is a continent. So Rwanda is in Africa. Okay. Genocide Watch is an international human rights organization that keeps a close watch on human rights violations in various countries across the globe. And Gregory Stanton is the founder of Genocide Watch. What had happened in Rwanda? There were two ethnic groups, Hutus and Tutsis. You must have heard of them. Hutus and Tutsis. And there were brutal, heart-wrenching communal clashes between the two groups, Hutus and Tutsis. Where Tutsis, they, made calibrated attacks because one of them was in power, and the group which was in power was trying to, make calibrated attacks on the other group. And the media in Rwanda, Radio Rwanda, one of the most famous things in the world today regarding genocide. There are so many stages as described genocide of, there are so many stages of genocide as described by George Orwell. And one of them is that when media becomes complicit with the state in making these, calculated attacks on a minority community in a particular country. And that's what exactly happened in Rwanda. The Radio Rwanda, it's very famous for its complicity with the state in organizing those attacks and stirring poison in the environment of the country against the ethnic groups, against the other ethnic groups, minority ethnic group. And that's what happened. Aditya Prakash says millions of people were killed and forced to migrate. Exactly. Because Radio Rwanda was trying to influence people against the particular community, the majority against the minority, and the media was trying to run the agendas. The media was trying to run the agendas. And this is the same Genocide Watch which has been referred to here. Genocide Watch in 1994 said that Rwanda is on the cusp of a genocide because the media is with the government is making calibrated efforts, the media is trying to stir poison in the ambience against the minorities. There are calibrated and targeted killings of minorities in Rwanda, and that's what going to happen, and that's what exactly happened as predicted by Genocide Watch. Now, Genocide Watch has sounded the same alarm on violence against Muslims in India. The same alarm has been sounded by the Genocide Watch on violence against Muslims in India. He condemned the statements made at the Dharam Sansad organized in Haridwar and said that they were intended to incite violence. Genocide Watch is an international organization established to prevent genocide and other kinds of mass murder and is credited with making critical interventions over the years. Okay. He condemned the statements made at the Dharam Sansad, organized in Haridwar, and said that they were intended to incite violence. Okay. Genocide Watch is an international organization established to prevent genocide and other kinds of mass murder, and is credited with making critical interventions over the years. Now, this statement reveals the quick and radical shift in India's socio-political narrative. The Dharam Sansad deserves to be acknowledged as an open call for violence against a community. Moreover, the state's inaction to proceed against the perpetrators violates principles under the Constitution and international law. Aditya Prakash says something. Okay. Now these are the kinds of things exactly that they were happening in Rwanda also. So this statement reveals the quick and radical shift in India's socio-political narrative. The Dharam Sansad deserves to be acknowledged as an open call for violence against a community. Moreover, the state's inaction to proceed against the perpetrators violates principles under the Constitution and international law. The radical shift in Modi's India. Hindu Nationalism and the Rise of Ethnic Democracy is a book written by Christophe Jaffrelet. Okay. Christophe Jaffrelet Rise in the book in Modi's India, Hindu Nationalism and the Rise of Ethnic Democracy 2021, that the Indian variant of ethnic democracy is both informed by the promotion of a Hindu definition of the nation in opposition to the secularism defined in the 1950 Constitution, and its opposition to the Christian and more especially Muslim minorities. Okay. Now there is a radical shift. There is a radical shift. The shift is that we started with the notion of secularism. You must be having an idea about what is secularism. What is secularism? Secularism, however, the word secular was added in the preamble by virtue of Constitution 42nd Amendment Act 1976 only. But Constitution was since beginning secular in nature. Secular in nature means that religion was made a completely private thing. The state was recognized as having no religion. The only religion the state has is the Constitution. There is no religion. Okay. Religion is private. You have freedom of conscience, practice, profess and to propagate any religion of your choice. And this is something very private. This is something, an affair between you and the God. Only this is completely one's individual's prerogative to do whatever he wishes to do in his or her religion and practice any religion he or she wants. That is the notion of the Constitution. The state is not going to align itself with any religion, and the state is not going to promote any religion. Religion is going to be a completely private affair. Okay. And that is what secularism is. Okay. Society should not be guided by some religious principles. It should be guided by the constitutional principles rather. Okay. But Christophe Jaffrelet argues that the Indian variant of ethnic democracy is both informed by the promotion of a Hindu definition of the nation in opposition to the secularism defined in the 1950 Constitution and its opposition to the Christian and more especially Muslim minorities. While discussing the position of Indian Muslims from social marginalization to institutional exclusion, he says that Muslims may well be India's new untouchables. You know, there is social marginalization to institutional exclusion. Now, these are the two stages. But these two stages are interrelated with each other, but they are different ones. We cannot use these two terms synonymously. We cannot say social marginalization is institutional exclusion. And social marginalization is a stage that precedes the stage of institutional exclusion. Indian Muslims, as per this article, they are trying to say that the writer is trying to say that there is an agenda of social marginalization of the Muslims. First, we are going to marginalize them in the society and then we are not, exclude them institutionally. Institutional exclusion means once you are socially marginalized, that means in a society, in an interactive society, Muslims are not given due respect. They are de facto treated as second class citizens. And once this becomes deep rooted, there is going to be an institutional exclusion. That means by way of institutions, they will be kept out of the democratic institutions. There will not be much intake of the Muslims in various institutions. So institutional exclusion. He says that Muslims may well be India's new untouchables. Muslims may well be India's new untouchables. New untouchables means that's how the environment is being created. That's what the writer is trying to say. Okay, so while discussing the position of Indian Muslims from social marginalization to institutional exclusion, he says that Muslims may well be India's new untouchables. Now, so far, the mistreatment of Muslims by the RSS, the BJP, the Hindu Mahasabha and other groups has been incremental. In 2017, Reuters reported that almost all of the attacks involving cow-related violence were recorded after the BJP government came to power at the center in 2014. Legislation such as the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, coupled with the National Register of Citizens (NRC), sought to deprive Muslims of citizenship. Hate speeches against Muslims have largely been met with indifference from the state authorities, as we saw in the Sudarshan TV case. Anti-conversion laws such as UP Prohibition of Unlawful Conversion of Religion Ordinance 2020, later replaced by the Act, seek to sow communal discord. The banning of the hijab in institutions in Karnataka indicates discrimination against Muslims. All of the events have been explained and narrated chronologically in one paragraph and summarily. Okay. Like there have been Reuters, according to the report, one of the report of the Reuters is one of the biggest media company of the world. It has its office in Bangalore, Thomson Reuters, and perhaps one in Hyderabad also. In 2017, Reuters reported that almost all of the attacks involving cow-related violence were recorded after the BJP government came to power at the center in 2014. Then there was CAA in 2019 along with NRC. Okay, CAA, what happened? That all the six minorities from the three Muslim neighboring countries, like from Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladesh. All the six minorities means Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Parsis, Buddhists, Christians. They all were recognized as if they, for example, migrate to India. They will be given citizenship on a mere stay of 5 years in place of 11 years, or 6 years in place of 11 years. And perhaps what if a Muslim comes from that place? For example, most of the people don't like Pakistan. Pakistan is a rogue state. There is no doubt about it. It is a rogue state, and terrorism, it's a land of terrorism. It's a land of terrorism. The governments of Pakistan, they give undue protection, and Pakistan is a safe havens for these terrorists. So, Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, coupled with the NRC, National Register of Citizens, sought to deprive Muslims of citizenship. What happened when NRC was conducted in the state of Assam? 14 lakh Bengali Hindus were deprived of NRC, deprived of their identities. This is how dangerous it is. People who have been living in the state since very beginning, who never left that place, those families were deprived of their names in the NRC. Hate speeches against Muslims have largely been met with indifference from the state authorities, as we saw in the Sudarshan TV case. Sudarshan TV is one of the most famous television news channels, which is very famous in doing this. It like comes out with some of the things happening in some corner of the country, like these kinds of things, and then conducts the debate on those issues. Anti-conversion laws such as UP Prohibition of Unlawful Conversion of Religion Ordinance 2020, later replaced by that. We have already discussed this. In one of the sessions, we have already discussed the UP Prohibition of Unlawful Conversion of Religion Act 2020, if you remember. Now, these seek to sow communal discord. Why do you want to, prohibit somebody from embracing another religion? Why do you want to create issues like love jihad? If we look at and have a bare perusal of Hadiya's case, Shafin Jam versus Ashokan KM, and the observations made by the Supreme Court had explicitly held this, that it is completely an individual's choice, if he or she is an adult, to embrace any religion, and marry a person of his or her own choice. No state, no parents have authority to intervene in such matters. Okay, this is a democratic right. That's the liberty of every democracy gives. Then again, the banning of the hijab in institutions in Karnataka indicates discrimination against Muslims. So these kinds of, these are the eventual things that are happening. But the speeches at Haridwar cross the line between hate speech and incitement to violence. According to reports, a member at the Sansad made an open call for Hindus to pick up weapons and referred to the treatment of the Rohingya in Myanmar. Another advocated for India to be a Hindu nation. This shift from the treatment of Indian Muslims as second-class citizens to making open threats of violence against them is what makes the Haridwar conclave an unfortunate yet defining moment in contemporary India. But the speeches at Haridwar cross the line between hate speech and incitement to violence. Now there are some comments regarding jihad. Chitralekha says UPSC jihad case, like love jihad, and they put the word jihad after any word to raise dispute. And let me tell you, countries like Pakistan, organizations like Taliban, they are a blot on any civilized society. They are a stigma on any civilized society. Any country like Pakistan that feeds terrorism on its soil needs to be legally marginalized and boycotted by all the people in the world, because it is these countries, because it is these people, these organizations like Al-Qaeda and Taliban who have attributed the most worst meanings to the word jihad. Okay, to the word jihad. Jihad is not what these organizations do. Killing of innocent beings is not jihad. Okay, in a religion that states in Quran that killing of one soul is as big as a sin as if you have killed the entire humanity, and saving an individual's life is as rewarding as if you have saved the entire humanity. Can you imagine? This is the verse from Quran, Holy Quran, and the religion that teaches us this level of humanity. Can you believe that the same religion would ask you to kill innocent beings? This is not what jihad is. It is the most misconstrued, misperceived, and misunderstood term in today's world. Jihad has been explained by Hazrat Ali, the fourth caliph of Islam, usually the first imam, and more popularly known as the fourth caliph in Islam. He has explained it in one line. The biggest jihad is with your own soul. You have to fight with it. You have to fight with it. You have to stay away from the worldly desires. You have to stay away from sins, and you have to stay away from sins, and that's how you have to struggle against it. That is the biggest jihad. Control your conscience. Do not commit sins. Do not commit violence. This is the best thing. Try to perfect yourself. Try to cleanse your soul. And that is the biggest jihad. That is the biggest jihad. You have to fight with your own self-conscience. Okay, so that is why the people in this world, the governments of today, have misunderstood. I call this a sheer misunderstanding and nothing else. I call this a sheer misunderstanding and nothing else. I want the two people, the two groups to sit together and explain each other, because we have the right to profess and propagate our religion. And we should explain to each other how loving our religions are. We have been taught to stay together in one society. We have been taught to make an inclusive society. That's what we are supposed to do. We are not supposed to create communal discords. Exactly, Aditya. Jihad means the holy act in order to maintain peace and harmony based on equality and principle of natural justice. And you have to be a perfect human being. That is the biggest jihad. Try to, struggle against yourself to be the perfect one in the society. That is the biggest jihad. So, but the speeches at Haridwar crossed the line between hate speech and incitement to violence. According to reports, a member at the Sansad made an open call for Hindus to pick up weapons. There was a member who said that you have to, as a Hindu, you have to pick up weapons, and referred to the treatment of Rohingya in Myanmar. What happened in Myanmar? You must be knowing this. What happened in Myanmar? In Myanmar, up till 1982, there was a civilian government in Myanmar. Okay. But in 1982, there was a military coup in Myanmar that ousted and threw away the civilian government, that toppled the civilian government and established its own rule. The same military government in 1984 brought a law recognizing 135 official ethnic groups in Myanmar, which did not include Rohingya Muslims. Rohingya is a tribe which is predominantly Muslim, and it has, a meager number of Hindus as well. They were de-recognized as citizens, and once you lose this identity of being a citizen of a nation, you are not eligible for any job, for any employment, and nobody would like even to marry you. That's what happened with Myanmar. Years passed by, and their condition was reduced to what they are today. They had to migrate. They had to, leave their country. They started infiltrating into Bangladesh, into Malaysia, into various other nations like India. Okay, that's what happened with Rohingya. They were killed. They were lynched. They were, they were ill-treated. They were misbehaved with. These are the kinds of things that happened in Myanmar. So one of the members at the Sansad, he said that as a Hindu, you have to pick up weapons and you have to treat these people like the Rohingyas in Myanmar were treated. Yes, probably. Indian Army too, because Indian Army was referred to as a secular army. Indian Army is a secular army, obviously. So another advocated for India to be a Hindu nation. This shift from the treatment of Indian Muslims as second-class citizens to making open threats of violence against them is what makes the Haridwar conclave an unfortunate yet defining moment in contemporary India. Now look at the definition of hate speech. Hate speech is often discussed in the context of the right to freedom of expression. While discussing free speech, the US Supreme Court laid down the test of imminent lawless action in Brandenburg versus Ohio 1969. You have to make sure, you have to learn this. Brandenburg versus Ohio 1969. a case of United States Supreme Court. And in this case, the US Supreme Court laid down the test of imminent lawless action. What is imminent lawless action? It held that speech stands protected under the First Amendment unless it is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. That means if you are delivering a hate speech, then as a listener, I should be incited and prompted to do some imminent lawless action right away. I should go out after listening to you. I should go out and I should start vandalizing the public property, and I should resort to violence and do some lawless action in the society. Okay. Okay. It held that speech stands protected under the First Amendment unless it is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. The Haridwar speeches fall into this category. This must be understood in the national context of the continuing marginalization and oppression of Indian Muslims through legal and political tools. Okay. You know, when you are delivering a speech which is full of derogatory remarks against a community, and you are prompting, inducing and convincing the listeners to pick up weapons and do some violence against a particular community, and your tone, your style as a speaker is so convincing, and the kinds of content that you are dwelling upon and the vocabulary that you are using is as conversational crutch is so convincing that as a listener I should be prompted right away to go and resort to some imminent lawless action and start, for example, violating the public property or vandalizing the public property. That's what I'm supposed to do. So this is the test of imminent lawless action. Have you understood the test of imminent lawless action? This was laid down by United States Supreme Court in Brandenburg versus Ohio in 1969. And this must be understood in the national context of the continuing marginalization and oppression of Indian Muslims through legal and political tools. The criminal law, the Constitution, does not define hate speech. That's what I told you in the beginning. We do not have a separate provision or any law that recognizes hate speech. The criminal law or the Constitution does not define hate speech. The United Nations strategy and plan of action on hate speech defines hate speech as any kind of communication in speech, writing or behavior that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of who they are. In other words, based on their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factor. Some media reports have referred to the Dharam Sansad incident as one of hate speech. Legally and politically, it is vital to distinguish between hate speech and incitement to violence. Every hateful speech need not incite violence. The Haridwar incident went far beyond discriminatory language. By reducing the statements to hate speech, one might be changing the gravity and nature of the offense. The writer is trying to say that hate speech is one of the offense and should be punishable. But incitement to violence is even more grave and dangerous. And the Haridwar conclave has gone beyond the limits of hate speech because they have incited people to commit violence. They have been asking people to pick up weapons and do the killings of Muslims the way they want to. Okay, our criminal law or Constitution does not define hate speech. The United Nations strategy and plan of action on hate speech defines hate speech as any kind of communication in a speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of who they are. In other words, based on their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factor. Okay. Media reports have been trying to attribute the Haridwar conclave with hate speech. But that is not sufficient, because Haridwar conclave has went even beyond making hate remarks. It has asked people, it has been inciting to violence. The incident must potentially attract numerous provisions of the IPC. For instance, Section 153A punishes promoting enmity between different groups on grounds of religion, race, place of birth, residence, etc. Okay, this is Section 153A. It punishes promoting enmity between different groups on grounds of religion, race, place of birth, residence, etc. Imputations and assertions prejudicial to national integration are penalized by Section 153B. Section 505C penalizes any statement with intent to incite or which is likely to incite any class or community of persons to commit any offense against any other class. Section 108 criminalizes abetment to crimes, including cases where the principal crimes are not committed. Section 120B punishes criminal conspiracy. However, it took enormous public mobilization and sustained demand to register the FIR in the case, that too with inadequate charges. There has been a significant delay in making arrest and conducting an investigation. Okay. Now there are so many provisions. Read this paragraph again and you will find so many provisions. Section 153A, Section 153B, Section 505C, Section 108, Section 120B. Okay. So for example, although we have not recognized hate speech as a separate offense under the name of hate speech, but still we have enormous provisions under the IPC for incriminating anyone who delivers a hate speech, and those provisions are Section 153A, Section 153B, Section 505, Section 108, Section 120B. These are all the sections and provisions which squarely fit into anyone in every case of hate speech. Okay, understood? Have you understood? Okay, now there are legal obligations. This is something even more interesting to note. A global consensus against genocide led to the crystallization of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide 1948. A global consensus against genocide led to the crystallization of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide 1948. And India is a state party to the convention. You have to remember this: Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide 1948, and India is a state party to the convention. The convention defines genocidal acts as those committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial or religious group. The convention defines genocidal acts as those committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial or religious group. How does this defines genocidal acts? Committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group. Article 3C punishes direct and public incitement to commit genocide. Article 4 says the perpetrators shall be punished, and Article 5 imposes an obligation on states to impose effective penalties for genocide. That means according to Article 5, every country who is a party to the convention must make a law to impose domestic law to impose effective penalties for genocide. And failing to investigate and charge the accused would mean a breach of the obligations under the convention. Failing to investigate and charge the accused would mean a breach of the obligations under the convention. Right? Attempts at marginalizing members of a religious community also threaten the secular foundations of our democracy. Attempts at marginalizing members of a religious community also threaten the secular foundations of our democracy. In S.R. Bomai versus Union of India 1994, the Supreme Court held that secularism is part of the basic structure of our constitution, and this must be read along with civil rights guarantees of religious freedom under Articles 25 to 28 of the Constitution. Article 25 to 28, they all relate to secularism, freedom of religion. And after discussing various constitutional provisions, the court said these provisions by implication prohibit the establishment of a theocratic state and prevent the state either identifying itself with or favoring any particular religion or religious sect or denomination. The state is enjoined to accord equal treatment to all religions and religious sects and denominations. Okay, that's what the Supreme Court said, that the state is obligated to provide equal treatment to all religions and protection to all religions and religious sects and denomination. You cannot leave these people in the open who are giving these hate speeches like this. Okay, in Qurban Ali versus Union of India 2022, the Supreme Court has issued notice in the plea seeking investigation into the event at Haridwar. Former chiefs of the Army and Navy, bureaucrats, politicians, and academics have strongly criticized the inaction of the authorities in registering the case. Just like Prableen said just a while ago, that even Indian Army was literally disrespected at the Haridwar conclave. And former chiefs of the Army and Navy, bureaucrats, politicians, and academics have strongly criticized the inaction of the authorities in registering the cases. Students at Aligarh Muslim University and other institutes have written to the Prime Minister that his silence on intolerance emboldens the hate-filled voices. In a federal system, chief ministers must also come together to demand immediate action. Okay, it is significant that the civil society guards against inflammatory acts that are likely to cause violence. The failure of democracy begins when the public is complicit through its silence in the excesses of the state. It is the public that should stand up and should not wait for the time to speak up, because the time has already gone. We should now try to do something. We have to protect our constitution. We have to protect our society. Okay? We can't let our secular fabric being torn apart like this. Okay? So this is about what is important for you in the last two paragraphs is the observations of the Supreme Court in S.R. Bomai versus Union of India in 1994, and then Qurban Ali versus Union of India 2022, when the Supreme Court had issued notice in the plea seeking investigation into the event at Haridwar. But unfortunately, the Delhi High Court had granted him the bail. Students at various universities like AMU. Former chiefs of the army, navy, bureaucrats, politicians, and academics have strongly criticized the inaction of the authorities. The students at Aligarh Muslim University there and other institutes, they have written to the Prime Minister that his silence on intolerance emboldens the hate-filled voices. Okay? So you must have understood this now. Any question, anything to add? Bail is the right of the accused, but it is also the discretion of the court. Bail is the right of the accused, but it is also the discretion of the court to reject the bail. If there is a reasonable apprehension that the accused is going to commit this crime again, and that's what actually happened. Bail was granted, and the court should be very careful and cautious while granting bail. Yeah, that is one of the another debates that you are trying to initiate, Aditya, that how far a person should be put on bar during pendency of a case. But giving bail so easily to people who have given hate speeches like this, who are not only committing a normal crime, but rather they are attacking the constitution. They are a menace to the society. They should not be. If bails are granted so easily, then this will encourage people to do these kinds of things again and again. So they should be avoided. That's why I'm saying. Otherwise, bail is the right of the accused. You are absolutely right in saying that. Anything else that you want to add or supplement, or anything you want to ask? Yes, Aditya. He got bail on the condition that he will not participate in any dharam sansad. Any question? Okay, then I'm signing off, and let's meet tomorrow with another topic. Okay? Till then, bye bye. Thank you.